Channel 3 News has obtained secret FBI documents on three of the most infamous days in Cleveland history. 50 years ago next week, a dramatic shootout left 10 dead and 15 wounded. It was called the Glenville Shootout. And those now declassified files, a new book, and some amazing interviews provide the bloody truth about what happened. I'm teaming up with the investigator Tom Meyer and producer Chris Canergiani for this exclusive three-part report.
If you wandered outside your neighborhood, no telling what would happen to you.
By the 1960s, Cleveland was a microcosm of racial division in America. Shababa Akili was a teenager.
Superior was a borderline. Many rebellions and stuff broke out in Cleveland along that border.
They were a time of intense struggle.
Adults felt the pressure too. Glenville resident Don Freeman was forced to live a double life, assembling the precursor to the Black Panther Party.
Yes, I was a teacher by day and a radical by night.
The bloody battle that erupted 50 years ago in many ways starts here at Corey Methodist Church. This former synagogue in the heart of Glenville attracted legendary speakers.
That church had Martin Luther King come there in 1963. A year later, Malcolm X came, and he gave his very famous the ballot or bullet speech there for the first time.
Akili and his friends were drawn to the self-defense message of Malcolm X.
He was not about any turn the other cheek kind of thing. And so I hadn't been a follower of Dr. King's because I saw it as not being effective against, racist violence.
Fred Evans attended the Malcolm X speech here and formed Black Nationalists of New Libya. Akili and his friends formed their own Black Power group.
And our organization was called the Afro-Set Black Nationalist Party for Self-Defense. And so we armed all of our members.
Soon, they were monitored by the FBI.
I was on the list.
And I didn't even know who Jag or who was. I'm like 17, 18 years old, and here goes somebody signing some papers, putting me on some kind of security index so that if anything happened in America, keep him under closed observation.
However, Martin Luther King had not given up on Cleveland. Carl Stokes was running for mayor, and King knew victory was vital.
And he worried that King would bring with him too much baggage and that he would alienate some of the white voters that he needed to get in '67. So he actually asked King not to come. King came anyway.
Many black residents in Glenville worried about police.
Johnson's commission on riots and crises in the cities has also said the same thing, that white cops don't come in black communities to quell riots and uprisings. They come in to kill.
Police didn't see it that way.
When I was out there working in uniform and stuff, we got along pretty well with most people.
But by then,
we were at war.
The fuse was lit.
So it was clear to us that, look, if we don't defend ourselves, we can't rely on anybody else to defend ourselves.
2 days later, an ambush of police by Fred Ahmed's Black Nationalist group set off a powder keg.
The story needs to be told.
The main reason that this story has not really been told is everybody involved in it has a reason for burying it.
But now we are digging up that story, and as we mentioned, FBI documents on the shootout were recently declassified, and the investigator Tom Meyer has seen them. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Russ. These are just some of the 400 pages of records that had been kept secret for about 50 years. Now, some people believe they exposed the real truth about what happened, the shootout and the riots. Tomorrow night at 11, Russ.
All right, Tom, we'll look forward to that. Thank you very much. And because there is so much information on this subject, we've produced a 6-part podcast that's available at WKYC.com or anywhere you get your podcast. Part 1 is available now.
Tonight, dramatic new details in FBI files about a wild and deadly day in Cleveland. It was 50 years ago this Monday when 10 were killed, more than 15 wounded in a confrontation with Black Power groups. It's called the Glenville Shootout. The investigator Tom Meyer says declassified records reveal what really happened that day and why.
I think that July 23rd, 1968 is one of the most infamous days in the city of Cleveland's history.
1968, J. Edgar Hoover's counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, targeted black nationalists as a hate group.
Look at the FBI and COINTELPRO and J. Edgar Hoover. They actually conducted war against the black citizens.
We examined dozens of declassified FBI documents. According to one agency memo, COINTELPRO was set up to prevent the coalition of militant black nationalist groups and prevent these militants from gaining respectability.
When the FBI wrote these files, they never expected that anyone would see them or see the light of day.
What used to be secret FBI documents are now for anyone to see. They're included in a book by Cleveland lawyer and author Jim Robinault. FBI files identified a number of black militants, including former Cleveland schoolteacher Don Freeman. COINTELPRO actually said he was a threat to national security.
If the police abuse you, you have not only the right, but the responsibility of defending yourself.
That was also the philosophy of Fred Ahmed Evans, a leader of a black militant group in Cleveland's Glenville neighborhood. Evans received thousands of dollars from a taxpayer-funded program to fight poverty called Cleveland Now. Instead of using the money to help those in need, he bought high-powered rifles and ammunition.
There was an absolute purpose to ambush the police and kill as many as they could.
With the help of FBI informants, Cleveland police were tipped off about the weapons, so they watched Evans closely, setting up surveillance in this area about a block from Evans' apartment, which is now gone.
It was pretty ridiculous. You got these white guys in unmarked police cars. I mean, it was a joke. And 90% of the neighborhood's black, and you got these white guys in his car. And
Evans feared they were about to be attacked by police. About 15 armed militants burst from Evans' home. The stakeout cars made clean getaways, but minutes later, a city tow truck arrived at this location to remove an abandoned vehicle. The truck, with flashing lights and the words Cleveland Police Department marked on the side, was shot at, along with its operators, who were wearing similar uniforms as cops.
Somebody started shooting at me with a shotgun. They hit me twice in the back, and I started running, and they hit me again.
Suddenly, all hell broke loose.
It seemed like they surrounded us. They were shooting at us from both sides with shotguns. They were coming from everywhere. I never seen so many guns in my life.
This was as chaotic can be.
Former patrolman Leonard Sims was one of many officers who responded. At least 30 gunshots struck his car.
It started over something that didn't make sense. They know they couldn't overthrow the police department. They decided they could.
When Jerry Viola and his partner arrived, they also came under heavy fire.
I could see tracers going by the front windshield, and you could hear automatic weapon fire.
Rookie cop Pete Ventura was in the thick of it, shooting it out with black militants, storming Evans' home, and rescuing wounded officers. The hour-long gun battle resulted in 10 killed, including 3 police officers, and 15 wounded. Ventura was the first to make contact with Evans when he surrendered.
You white honky you, he says, if my gun went to jam, he says, I'd have killed you, more of you.
The gun battle triggered the city's second riot in only 2 years. The Glenville neighborhood was set on fire. Firefighters were shot at while trying to do their job. Carl Stokes, the country's first black big city mayor, called in the National Guard. 34 buildings and 63 businesses destroyed in 2 days. $18 million in damage in today's dollars. And yet, some militants tried to justify the rioting.
And looting and burning will continue as long as the white merchants are in the community exploiting the black community.
Stokes took a lot of heat for ordering all white cops to stay out of the riot area. But Robinault said it was a smart move.
I think it saved a lot of lives because I think there were a lot of people in high retribution mode. They had been attacked, ambushed.
Ahmed Evans was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. He was in prison for 9 years when he died of cancer. Racism and poverty triggered the shootout. So what's changed in 50 years? Part 3 tomorrow night. I'm the investigator, Tom Meyer.
The investigator, Tom Meyer, with part 3 of a 3-part report.
Fred Ahmed Evans led a black nationalist movement in Cleveland, which agreed with the philosophy of Malcolm X.
To have once been a criminal is no disgrace. To remain a criminal is the disgrace.
The Muslim minister advocated armed self-defense and the separation of races to address systemic racism.
There's no denying that there's been progress, but my view is it's been very small and very isolated.
Cleveland author Jim Robenalt says the issues that triggered the Glenville gun battle and riots still plague Cleveland today. Police violence against blacks is one reason the city agreed to federal oversight and restrictions on the use of force.
What the hell is wrong with you, man?
We're still one of the poorest cities in the country, with the poverty rate around 35%.
I think in a lot of ways poverty is much worse. Racism is still riding high.
Education and living conditions still big problems today as they were 50 years ago.
One of the basic problems in the black community in Cleveland is that they have such inferior housing.
This 94-year-old Glenville neighbor
it was a battlefield.
Witnessed the shootout in 1968 and says the civil rights movement has not solved racial discrimination in Cleveland and across the country.
Long ways to go. Long ways to go. Although we do have a lot of fight, a lot of more say so now than we did have in them days, like Al Sharpton and all those people.
Following the Huff riots in Cleveland just 2 years prior to the Glenville shootout, a black power group called the Afro Set was founded. Taye Uuru's uncle Omar set out to eliminate the root causes of urban unrest, poverty, and racism. He sees racism and police brutality as ongoing problems.
When I started trying to get jobs and I started trying to apply for loans, and when I got pulled over by the police and they tell me they'd kill me for, just being black, then I understood that it wasn't over. It hadn't changed.
Ahmed Evans and black militants believe they waged a battle for their people. But as Robenalt argues, there's no excuse for violence by black nationalists or police. So what's the status of black nationalism today?
There is no black nationalist movement now.
Some say the movement Black Lives Matter replaces the black power groups of the 60s. But former militants disagree, saying Black Lives Matter focuses more on police brutality and killings of blacks.
Things are still very much problematic. I think some things have gotten better, but you don't have a giant movement like Black Lives Matter develop out of nothing.
Sababa Akili made the cover of Robenalt's book about urban guerrilla warfare and the Glenville gun battle. He was a teenager back then with an FBI file. He still considers himself an activist 50 years later, believing in the principles of black nationalism and in Malcolm X, who epitomized the black power philosophy.
Well, Malcolm said that if somebody have a 12-inch knife stuck in your back and they pull it out 6 inches, you can't call that progress. And that's what it is now.
Former police officer Lou Garcia obtained a court order and took possession of the evidence in the Glenville gun battle trials. He turned it all over to the Cleveland Police Museum, making sure that lessons learned are lessons never lost. I'm the investigator, Tom Meyer.